Story 1. Profiles joined the chat room, attempting to blend in and gather information. It wasn't easy. Everyone there was very cautious, and the moderators were quick to ban anyone who seemed suspicious. But Lisa was skilled at this. She managed to get us accepted into the group. We spent hours each day in that chat room, reading conversations and trying to piece together the puzzle. One night, a user named Watcher started a private chat with Jake. Watcher claimed to know about the disappearances and hinted at knowing who the puppeteer was. Jake played along, trying to get as much information as possible. Watcher told Jake about a place called the Playground, a part of the dark web where the puppeteer was said to operate. It was supposedly where the live streams and other horrific activities took place. To get there, you needed a special invite and a set of coordinates hidden in various puzzles. We realized that we had to find these coordinates to get closer to the puppeteer. Jake and Lisa worked tirelessly to crack the puzzles, while I continued to monitor the chat room and gather any new leads. Every time we solved a puzzle, it felt like we were getting closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. One evening, Jake called me in a panic. He had found something, an encrypted message that seemed to be a direct communication from the puppeteer. It was addressed to us, the Darknet detectives. The message read, "You're getting closer. Stop now or face the consequences." We knew we couldn't stop. We had to find Sarah and Mark. Ignoring the threat, we pressed on, but it wasn't long before the consequences became all too real. A few nights later, I was working late on another puzzle when my phone rang. It was Lisa, and she sounded terrified. She said that someone had hacked into her system and was watching her through her webcam. She had tried to disable it, but it kept turning back on. I told her to leave her apartment and come to my place so we could figure out what to do next. While waiting for Lisa, I got another call, this time from Jake. He said he had been followed home from school. He was certain it wasn't his imagination. A man in a black hoodie had been tailing him. I told him to stay inside and lock all his doors. Lisa arrived at my apartment an hour later, visibly shaken. We spent the night trying to secure our systems and figure out who was targeting us. It was clear now that the puppeteer had eyes on us and was serious about his threats. The next morning, we couldn't reach Jake. His phone went straight to voicemail. We rushed to his house, but it was too late. His room was trashed, his computer smashed, and Jake was nowhere to be found. We called the police, but there was no evidence of foul play, just like with Sarah and Mark. Lisa and I were the only ones left. We felt completely exposed and vulnerable, but we couldn't give up. We had to find out who the puppeteer was and stop him. We decided to go deeper into the playground, hoping it would lead us to some answers. We spent days and nights without sleep, solving puzzle after puzzle, each one more twisted than the last. The clues led us to a final set of coordinates. Following them, we found ourselves at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place that gave you chills just by looking at it. We stood outside trying to decide what to do. Going in felt like stepping into the mouth of madness, but we had no choice. We had to know what happened to our friends. Taking a deep breath, we entered the warehouse. Inside, it was dark and cold, the air thick with the smell of decay. As we moved deeper, we found rooms filled with old, broken computers and video equipment. It looked like a place where nightmares were made real. Then we found a door with a sign that read "Control Room." Inside, the walls were covered with monitors, each showing different parts of the warehouse. In the center of the room was a large computer, its screen displaying a live chat. We approached, our hearts pounding, and saw a message appear on the screen: "Welcome, Darknet detectives. You've reached the end of the line." Before we could react, the door slammed shut behind us, and the monitors flickered to life, showing live feeds of empty rooms. But as we watched, one by one, figures appeared on the screen: Sarah, Mark, and Jake, all bound and gagged, looking terrified. Then a new figure stepped into view on one of the monitors, a man in a black hoodie. He looked directly at the camera, and spoke in a distorted voice, "Now the real game begins." We knew then that we were trapped and that the horrors we had uncovered were just the beginning. The moment the door slammed shut behind us, Lisa and I knew we were in deep trouble. The eerie glow of the monitors illuminated the room, casting long, menacing shadows. The images on the screens were haunting Sarah, Mark, and Jake, all bound and gagged, clearly terrified. The man in the black hoodie, the puppeteer, looked straight into the camera and said, "Now the real game begins." Lisa and I exchanged a panicked glance. We needed to find a way out, but our first priority was finding our friends. The control room had multiple doors leading to different parts of the warehouse. We decided to split up, each taking a different path, hoping to cover more ground and find them faster. I took the left corridor, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway was dimly lit, and every creak and groan of the old building made me jump. I kept my flashlight steady, scanning every corner for signs of movement. The air was thick with the smell of mold and rust, making it hard to breathe. As I moved deeper into the warehouse, I found a series of rooms that looked like they had been used for some kind of twisted experiments. Old medical equipment, rusty and stained, lay scattered around. There were chains and shackles bolted to the walls, and the sight of dried blood sent chills down my spine. It was clear that this place had seen horrors beyond imagination. Suddenly, I heard a faint noise coming from one of the rooms ahead. I moved cautiously, pressing my ear against the door. It sounded like muffled crying. My heart raced as I slowly pushed the door open, praying I wouldn't be too late. Inside, I found Sarah. She was tied to a chair, her face streaked with tears. When she saw me, her eyes widened in relief. I rushed over, quickly untying her and pulling the gag from her mouth. "Alex, we have to get out of here," she whispered urgently. "Where are the others?" I asked, helping her to her feet. "I don't know. He took them somewhere else. We have to find them before it's too late." We hurried back to the control room, hoping to regroup with Lisa. When we got there, Lisa was already waiting, but she looked shaken. She had found Mark, but his condition was worse. He had been tortured, and though he was alive, he was barely conscious. "We need to get him out of here," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "He needs medical attention." We knew we couldn't carry Mark and search for Jake at the same time. We made the tough decision to leave Mark in the control room while we continued searching for Jake. Sarah stayed with him to keep him safe and to try to reach help, while Lisa and I ventured further into the warehouse. The deeper we went, the more sinister the place became. We found rooms filled with disturbing photos and notes documenting the twisted games the puppeteer had played with his victims. It was clear that he had been watching us for a long time, learning our strengths and weaknesses, preparing for this moment. Eventually, we came to a large, locked door. We could hear faint sounds on the other side, like someone struggling. Lisa managed to pick the lock, and we burst in to find Jake tied to a chair, just like Sarah had been. He looked weak, but otherwise unharmed. As we freed Jake, he whispered, "It's a trap. He's watching us. He wanted us to find each other." Just then, the monitors in the control room flickered back to life, showing us a live feed of our own actions. The puppeteer's voice echoed through the warehouse, chilling us to the bone. "You're all predictable," he taunted. "You've done exactly what I wanted. Now let's see if you can make it out alive." Panic set in as we realized that every move we made was being watched and manipulated. We had to think fast, we couldn't go back the way we came, and we had no idea how many more traps he had set for us. We decided to stick together and make a run for it. Lisa led the way, using her knowledge of security systems to try to outsmart the puppeteer. We moved quickly but cautiously, knowing that any wrong move could be our last. As we neared what seemed to be an exit, we heard footsteps behind us. The puppeteer was close, and he wasn't alone. Shadows moved in the darkness, and we knew we were surrounded. We braced ourselves, ready to fight if necessary, but our main goal was to get out and get help. Suddenly, a side door burst open, and a group of armed men stormed in. For a moment I thought we were saved, but then I saw their uniforms. They were part of the puppeteer's twisted network. They grabbed us, separating us and dragging us in different directions. I fought as hard as I could, but it was no use. As they pulled me away, I caught a glimpse of Lisa, Sarah, and Jake being forced into different rooms. The last thing I saw was the puppeteer standing in the shadows, watching with satisfaction. "The game is over," he said, his voice cold and final. Story 2. This is from way back when Silk Road 1 was still going strong. I was looking for a certain substance but couldn't find it in my part of the world for a decent price. This was really frustrating because it had been plentiful and easy to find in the past, but for whatever reason things were dry and people were starting to look for alternatives. I was told about Tor, the Onion router, and how to access the Silk Road. For anyone who doesn't know, Tor is like Google Chrome for the dark web. It's the program you need to access the unique web page URLs that only those websites use. Silk Road was a dark web marketplace where you could buy and sell literally anything. To use it, you had to trust Bitcoin and rely on a backdoor system to get what you paid for. The whole experience is totally surreal to look back on, but probably one of the coolest aspects in the early 2000s. Tor was called the Onion router because it randomized your IP with every click of the mouse. 1 minute it might say you were in Vermont, the next you were in Peru, then Helsinki. You get the picture. It's an untraceable system unless, of course, you underestimate the means of the system, but that's a whole other discussion entirely. So I got Tor and I got onto the dark web. I found myself on Silk Road. Everything seemed pretty straightforward, so I made my post like I would on Craigslist or any other message board. "Hi, looking for mushrooms, please respond." That was pretty much the gist of it. It felt sketchy and stupid, but out of options I gave it a whirl. When I checked the next morning, I hadn't received any messages and pretty much wrote it off. What the hell was I thinking anyway? But after a few days, someone did respond. They had an offer and requested to message me, which I accepted. We parlayed the details, and suddenly I found myself agreeing to send the stranger around $800. This was way more than I originally planned on spending, but for whatever reason I found the person I was talking to charming. Drug dealers seemed to have that effect on me, so I knew this guy was legit. I only had $200 set aside for the purchase, so the additional $600 was biting into my rent and bill money. I had to convert all of it into Bitcoin and then ship it off to a random wallet address. Honestly, the whole thing felt pretty high-tech and cool at the time. After payment, the guy agreed to ship me 1 ounce of mushrooms per week for 6 weeks. The delayed nature of it kept it safer, more secure, and would allow me to make more sales over time. It all made sense in my head. Lo and behold, the delivery never arrived. 2 weeks went by nothing. And the guy's account vanished from my contact history. That charm I felt was that of a scam artist. I just couldn't tell the difference through a computer screen. I felt stupid as there was nothing I could do, but the real problem was I was planning on selling that first shipment to cover the rent money I'd spent. I wouldn't be able to cover my ass in 2 weeks when the first of the month came. I had all kinds of problems to deal with in real life now, so I did the one thing I could do to get revenge on the dark web. I left that guy a bad review on the Silk Road. I said he scammed me, probably scammed many others, and warned people not to give him any money. Do not conduct business of any kind with this guy. He will definitely steal your money. After that, I did my best to forget and just started hustling to get the bills covered. It was grueling, but I found some side gigs and started filling up the coffers before the next month. I came home one day and just wanted to relax and veg out on the computer for a little bit. I remembered that whole dark web ordeal and decided to take a look at my Silk Road post. That's when I saw I had a new message. The message went like this: "Hello, I'm a reputable vendor here on Silk Road. I saw your post this morning about the scam artist user. I had an exchange with him a few days ago wherein he also tried to scam me. So, I'm taking actions against him. I've used one of my alternative accounts to sell him several ounces of MDMA. He's already paid for the product. And what I put in the mail was a 1/4 pound of sweet sugar crystals and a sticky note with a frowny face and his full name written on it. Is there anything else you'd like this user to suffer? I had no idea who this person was that was messaging me, but they were allowing me to come up with consequences for that guy. It was some kind of honor among thieves, and honestly, I found it enthralling. What a message to receive that the Silk Road system was self-correcting. Unfortunately, I didn't really have any creative ways off the top of my head to make him suffer, so I didn't make any suggestions. The vendor told me that was okay, the user would have lots to deal with in the coming weeks. Then he asked for my Bitcoin wallet address and the amount owed from the scam. I thought long and hard about my answer. Part of me wanted to lie to see if I could turn a profit from the whole ordeal, but another part of me was sure this person could find out the truth. It was the dark web. These people could find out anything. If I lied, it might cost me more in the end, so I just told him the truth, which even then sounded pretty steep. He gave me the okay and said it'd be back to me soon. No way, I thought. It was unbelievable. But my bad review was actually going to get me my money back. After the experience that I had, I wasn't really sure any of this was legit. When I woke up the next morning, though, all the money had been returned to my wallet. I wish I could explain the sensation that I had, like my spirit had been refilled. I believed in humanity and, of course, carried a deep respect for the dark web community after that. Story 3. While randomly clicking around Tor one night, I found a site with a riddle and a text box to enter the answer. After figuring out the puzzle, it took me to another page that had a message to decode and another text box. Basically, every page was a puzzle, and it got harder every time. I was 15 years old and not very smart with those kinds of things, so I found a forum where other people had discovered it too and were all talking about it. Apparently, on the final page, it displayed a date and a quote from Alice in Wonderland. I believe it was just a site meant to be some sort of entertainment for very experienced decoders and programmers, but there was also some speculation it might be a hacker recruiting site similar to Cicada 3301. Either way, it creeped me out a lot. Despite all these fears, though, I couldn't look away. I was big into breaking secret codes, and this seemed to be a brain buster. The forum I found became incredibly handy, almost like a video game guide helping me figure out some of the later puzzles. You see, I wanted to do them all on my own. Any good code breaker knows that there's possibly more than one way to solve a puzzle, and the results could yield different outcomes. I spent a few hours after school each day trying to figure out the latest riddle. It didn't take long before I was at the same page everyone else had arrived at a date and a quote. But there was something else too, a disgusting, bloody pig mask sitting at the end of a table next to the text. Maybe it wasn't even a mask, it could have been a legit pig head severed right off the body. I mean, it was that gory looking. There were a few people in the forum claiming that there were additional levels after the one I'd already reached, but the vast majority of the decoders denied this and said the text box with the quote and date was the end of the puzzle. I didn't know who to believe, but having a lot of free time and already being invested, I decided to keep at it. Maybe there was more. I reached out to one of the conspiracy theorists and asked him how to move beyond the pig head page. He didn't respond at first, but after some prodding, he came back pretty hostile with all kinds of threats. This guy didn't see the decoding as a puzzle, he saw it as a race to some kind of prize, so he wanted to keep his progress to himself. He said he'd hack me, turn my life upside down if I bothered him again. This only fueled my interest, though. As you probably figured out, I was a supreme nerd throughout high school, somewhat versed with the dark web. I had some smoke and mirrors in place to mask my IP from unwanted investigation. As the week went on, a few more decoders moved on from the last level. I was one of them. I don't want to get too deep into what the puzzle was, but we figured out that there was a code hidden in the date and the quote on the screen. If you typed in the missing characters, it sent you to another screen. The next screen had a question, a text box, and a timer starting at 3 minutes. The rest of the bloody corpse of the pig was now visible. I knew it wasn't a mask, it was a real series of photos of a decapitated pig with blood and gore everywhere. I'll never forget that sight for as long as I live. The images will never leave me. Once you made it to that page, there was no going back. When the 3 minutes expired, a message appeared on the screen. Thank you for participating in this game. Do not go looking for any further details, they will find you. And the page went black. Needless to say, that was the last time I ventured onto the dark web for anything. Nothing of importance ever happened after that, so I guess the message was fake, just something meant to scare the daylights out of the person who was dumb enough to get that far.